The sound was not the first thing that broke the silence. It was the light, a blinding, pulsating wash of red and blue that violently shattered the quiet dark of the suburban street, slicing through the blinds of the living room. It painted the walls in frantic, silent flashes of alarm. 8-year-old Leo, who had been on the floor meticulously arranging his plastic dinosaurs into a perfect, spiraling timeline from Triassic to Cretaceous, froze. His hands clamped over his ears. The order was broken. The world was wrong. "It's okay, Leo," Dr. Samuel Harding said, his voice the deep, calm rumble that was the boy's only anchor. It's just a fire truck. Probably. Stay with your dinosaurs, buddy." But then came the sound. Not a siren, but a hard, percussive thud, thud, thud on the solid oak front door. It was too loud. Too late. Leo began to rock, a low hum of distress building in his throat. No, loud, he whispered, his small body tightening. "I know, Leo. I'm right here." Samuel, 65 years old, a man whose entire life had been defined by the quiet rustle of book pages and the polite applause of lecture halls, felt a cold knot of dread form in his stomach. He was in his pajamas, a faded university sweatshirt. He was a grandfather. He was a historian. He was not a man who received pounding at his door after 10 p.m. He opened it, and the world dissolved. 4 men. Dark suits. Flashing badges. Dr. Samuel Harding, the lead agent, barked, his voice devoid of courtesy. "Yes, I'm Dr. Harding. What is this?" "Sir, you are under arrest." The words were alien. They didn't compute. "Arrest? For what?" "A parking ticket." "This is a mistake. Warrant for the arrest of Samuel Harding, issued by the state of Massachusetts, on charges of armed robbery and felony murder." Murder. The word hung in the air. A grotesque, impossible thing. Before Samuel could even form a protest, they were on him. Hands seized his arms. He was spun around, his shoulder protesting in a sharp crackle of arthritis as his hands were wrenched behind his back. The cold, metallic click of handcuffs echoed in the hallway. "No!" he shouted, not in protest, but in sudden, blinding terror. "My grandson!" "Wait!" Leo, seeing his papa seized by strangers, erupted. The hum became a high, piercing scream of pure, undiluted panic. He scrambled backward, crashing into a tower of carefully packed boxes labeled Arizona, Kitchen, sending them tumbling. "Leo, it's okay." "Papa's okay," Samuel yelled, his voice cracking. He tried to twist, to show his grandson a reassuring face. But the agents were already dragging him, half shuffling, onto the porch, into the blinding, chaotic strobe of the police lights. "Sir, you need to be quiet. You don't understand. My grandson, he's autistic. You're terrifying him." Leo. He saw his neighbor, Mrs. Petrov, her face pale with shock, her front door open. "Maggie," he yelled, a desperate primal plea. "Call Maggie. Get Maggie Riley, please." "Leo, take care of Leo." The last thing he saw before the car door slammed shut, sealing him in a sudden muffled tomb, was his grandson's face, pressed against the living room window, his mouth open in a silent scream, his small hands beating against the glass. It was the soundless image of a world breaking in two. The law office of Emily Hayes was, to put it charitably, a testament to optimism. To put it accurately, it was a 12 by 14-foot room above a struggling bakery that smelled perpetually of yeast and stale coffee. The frosted glass on the door, which she had paid to have lettered in confident gold leaf, Emily Hayes, ESQ. Attorney at law, was already peeling. At 32, Emily was a case study in failed idealism. She had been the star of her class, the one who had clerked for a federal judge, the one who had landed a coveted associate position at a behemoth firm in New York. She had been, by every metric, a success. And she had hated it. She hated the 100-hour weeks defending corporations that, in her opinion, were actively poisoning the planet. So she had cashed out, taken her tiny 401k, and returned to her small New England university town, drowning in student loan debt, to make a difference, to fight for the little guy. The problem, she had discovered, was that the little guy didn't pay very well. If he paid at all, she was 3 months behind on the rent for her tiny office. Her credit cards were maxed out. Her last client had paid her in homemade jam. She was, in no uncertain terms, on the verge of total, humiliating bankruptcy. She was a week away from calling her old boss in New York and begging for her soul-crushing job back. She was staring at a final disconnection notice for her internet when the phone rang, the sound so sudden it made her jump. It was Marge, the court clerk. "Emily? Got a bad one for you. Court appointed." Emily's heart sank. Court appointed. The pay was abysmal. "Marge, I'm not sure I can take anything new right now. You're going to want to take this one, kid," Marge said, her voice dropping. "It's Dr. Harding." Emily's breath caught. "Sam? Dr. Harding? What? Did he get a DUI?" The man whose seminar, History, Dissent, and the Law, was the entire reason she had gone to law school. "Try murder one, Emily," Marge said flatly. "They just pulled him in on a cold case from 30 years ago. Armed robbery. A guard died. He's at the county jail, and he's asking for you." The floor seemed to drop out from under her. This wasn't a case. This was a nightmare. This wasn't a lifeline to save her practice. It was a boulder that would drag her, and her mentor's legacy, straight to the bottom. When she saw him in the beige antiseptic visiting room of the county jail, her resolve shattered. The intellectual giant who could hold a lecture hall of 500 students spellbound. He was a terrified, 65-year-old man in an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow with shock. "Emily," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He reached a hand up to the thick plate glass separating them, his fingers splayed. "Thank God. You have to. You have to fix this. It's a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake." "I know, Sam." "I'm on it," she said, forcing a confidence she didn't feel, her legal pad open on her lap. "They said it was a cold case?" "From 1995. That's what they said, 30 years ago." "Emily, I was 35 years old. I was teaching. I was an adjunct. I was writing my dissertation." "Okay, that's good. That's an alibi. Where were you on the day of the robbery?" "March 12th, 1995. Samuel's face, which had held a flicker of hope, crumpled. "March. Emily, that was 30 years ago. I don't know what I had for breakfast last Tuesday. I have no idea. I was. At the university? Probably. How can anyone prove where they were on a random Tuesday 3 decades ago?" He was right. It was an impossible question. "They must have something, Sam," Emily said, her stomach tightening. "A witness?" "No," he said, shaking his head. They said it was a machine. A computer. They said they have a picture." The picture, as it turned out, was an unholy trinity of bad data. A grainy, black and white still frame captured from a 1995-era VHS security tape, showing a man in a ski mask pulled halfway up his face, yelling. The quality was abysmal. It was a face of shadows and static, but the young, ambitious district attorney, a man named Thomas Sharp, didn't see static. He saw a career-making conviction. "Emily, nice to see you slumming it with the rest of us," Sharp said, leaning back in his expensive chair. He was all polished shoes and aggressive ambition. A man who believed data was the new gospel. "Cut the crap, Tom. You and I both know this is absurd. You can't identify anyone from that photo. You're railroading a 65-year-old man." Sharp smiled, a thin, humorless expression. "I'm not. The technology is. We ran the image through the new state-of-the-art AI facial recognition system. We cross-referenced it with every driver's license, passport, and university ID in the New England database. The system found a match. He slid a single piece of paper across his polished desk. It was a report. At the top was the grainy photo of the robber. Below it was Dr. Samuel Harding's smiling, placid faculty ID photo. And at the bottom, a single, devastating number. Match probability, 99.8%. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. 99. Tom, that's insane. It's a 30-year-old photo. The man is masked. The algorithm doesn't analyze the mask, Emily. It analyzes the exposed facial structure, the orbital sockets, the nasal bridge, the cheekbone geometry. It's infallible. The machine says it's him. 99.8%. I'd call that beyond a reasonable doubt. He leaned forward, his voice dropping into a register of false sincerity. Look, I know he's an old man. A local fixture. I don't want to drag him through this. He pleads guilty to the armed robbery. We'll drop the murder one. He does 20 years. With good behavior, he's out in 12. It's a gift. Take it. Emily felt sick. 20 years. For Samuel, at 65, that was a death sentence. He's innocent, she whispered, as much to herself as to him. The algorithm says he's 99.8% guilty. Sharp countered, tapping the paper. And in my courtroom, that's the only number that matters. You have 48 hours to accept, or we go to trial for murder. Emily walked out of the DA's office into the cold, damp air, her footsteps echoing her own financial ruin. She was a failed lawyer, representing her childhood hero, who was facing a life sentence based on the word of a black box. She had no alibi. She had no evidence. She had no money. All she had was a 0.2% margin of error. The next day was the visit, the one that would change everything. Dr. Margaret Maggie Riley, Samuel's colleague and closest friend, a formidable woman with a steel spine and kind eyes, had managed to navigate the complex bureaucracy to get Leo approved for a contactless visit. Emily met them in the noisy, chaotic lobby of the jail. Leo was holding Maggie's hand in a white-knuckled grip, his other hand clutching his favorite dinosaur, a small, worn stegosaurus. He was wearing noise-canceling headphones, but his eyes were wide, darting everywhere, taking in the harsh fluorescent lights, the clanging metal doors, the shouting. He's... Maggie said, her voice tight with a rage Emily recognized. But this place is a sensory hell for him. Are we ready? They were led into the visiting area. A long room, split by a thick wall of reinforced glass, pockmarked with metal speaker grills. Samuel was already there, on the other side, in his orange jumpsuit. He looked smaller, grayer. When he saw Leo, a sound, half sob, half laugh, escaped him. Leo, buddy, Papa's right here. Leo, seeing his grandfather, finally let go of Maggie's hand. He ran to the glass and stopped. He reached out his small hand, his fingers touching the cold, unyielding surface. He looked confused. He tapped it. Tap, tap. Papa, he said, his voice small. I'm here, Leo. I'm right here, Samuel said, pressing his own large, trembling hand against the glass, trying to align his palm with his grandson's. Leo didn't understand. This was wrong. This was a box. He tapped the glass again, harder. Tap, tap, tap. Papa, home. I can't, buddy. Not right now. Home. Leo insisted, his voice starting to rise. The first wave of a meltdown building. He didn't understand the glass. He didn't understand the box. He put his forehead against the barrier, his small fists now beating a frantic rhythm. Tap. 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 Home. Home. Oh, God. Samuel choked, sliding down in his chair, his face collapsing. He was weeping. Great. Shuddering. silent sobs. He turned to Emily, his face a mask of pure primal terror. "You see, Emily," he gasped, his voice breaking over the crackling intercom. "You see what this is? I'm 65. I don't care if I die in this place. I really don't. But him. My son and his wife are gone. I'm all he has. If I am convicted, where does he go?" He pointed a shaking finger at his grandson, who was now being gently held by Maggie, screaming in frustration. "He goes into the system. He goes to a foster home. A state facility. They don't know him, Emily. They don't know his dinosaurs. They don't know he can't sleep without his weighted blanket. They will see him as a problem. They'll drug him. They'll break him." He pressed his face to the glass, his tears smearing the surface. "They will destroy the last piece of my son. I will die in here, and he will die out there. This is a death sentence for us both." He looked up at her, his eyes blazing with a desperation that burned away all his academic gentility. "Forget me. You save him. You are all he has. You're all we have. That machine, Emily, you fight it, or you are burying us both." Emily stood frozen, the sound of Leo's cries and Samuel's sobs echoing in her ears. The abstract case of 99.8% was gone. The debt, the failing office, the humiliation, it all vanished. All that was left was that little boy's fist on the glass. She wasn't a lawyer fighting for a client anymore. She was a woman fighting for a child's life. "I will," she said, her voice shaking, not with fear, but with a sudden, cold, diamond-hard rage. "I will. I promise you, Sam. I will get you out. I will get you both to Arizona." She left the jail, not as a failure, but as a woman on fire. She had no money, no resources, and no evidence. But she had a 0.2% margin of error. And for the first time in her life, she was going to use the very lessons Dr. Harding had taught her. "Do not trust the storyteller," he used to say, pacing in front of his lecture hall. "Do not trust the summary. Do not trust the accepted narrative. Always, always, go back to the primary source. The letter, the diary, the original document. The truth is not in the analysis, it is in the archive." The DA had an analysis. 99.8%. Emily was going to the archive. For the next week, she lived in the sub-basement of the university library. The archive smelled of dust, old glue, and decaying paper. She had one date, March 12th, 1995, and the days surrounding it. She wasn't looking for a high-tech solution. She was looking for a low-tech one. She taught herself how to use the ancient, hulking microfiche machine, the green light humming, her eyes burning as she scrolled through blurry, digitized pages of the Boston Globe and the Herald. Nothing. Weather reports. City council meetings. She moved to the university's own records. She started pulling VHS tapes from the student news station. She sat in a cold cubicle, watching grainy, time-stamped footage of campus life in 1995. Students walking. A bad campus band. A boring protest about cafeteria food. Nothing. She was exhausted. Her eyes felt like they were full of sand. She was running on vending machine coffee and pure, unadulterated spite. She was failing. Leo's face flashed in her mind, his hand on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. She got up and went to the last, most neglected section. Student publications. Bound volumes of the University Chronicle. The weekly student newspaper. She pulled the heavy, dusty volume for the 1994 to 1995 academic year, her arms aching. She found the issue for the week of March 13th, 1995. She scanned the front page. Tuition hike sparks outrage. A story about a 10% tuition increase. She flipped the page. Page 2. Sports. Page 3. Arts and entertainment. And there, in the corner, a small, 3 by 5-inch photograph with a caption, "Students and faculty sit in for access." The photo was grainy, taken with a cheap 35mm camera. It showed a group of about 30 people in the main administration building, holding hand-painted signs. "Knowledge, not profit. Freeze fees." Emily's heart stopped. In the back of the group, not holding a sign, but standing by a cardboard box of donuts, was a younger man. Thinner, with a truly terrible haircut and wide wire-rimmed glasses, he was handing a styrofoam cup of coffee to a student. It was, unmistakably, a 35-year-old Dr. Samuel Harding. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely read the caption. Professor Samuel Harding and students participate in the 36-hour sit-in for access at the Chancellor's office, which began at noon on Tuesday, March 12th. Tuesday, March 12th. She grabbed her phone, her fingers fumbling with the calculator. The bank robbery, the one in Massachusetts, had taken place at 4:30 p.m. on March 12th, 1995. The university campus was in Vermont. She mapped it. The distance was 311 miles. It was impossible. He couldn't be in both places. He wasn't a bank robber. He was the guy bringing donuts to a sit-in. She held the newspaper to her chest and, alone in the silence of the archive, she began to cry. Not tears of sadness, but of a fierce, terrible joy. She had it. She had the 0.2%. The courtroom was a tomb. D.A. Thomas Sharp had presented his case with devastating, sterile efficiency. He had a forensics expert explain the science of AI. He showed the jury the 99.8% match over and over, the number glowing on a massive screen, until it seemed like the only truth in the universe. "The machine has spoken," he said in his closing. "The algorithm does not lie. It does not have a vendetta. It feels no bias. It is pure, cold, impartial logic. 99.8%. Dr. Samuel Harding is a man who lived a lie for 30 years. It is time for the truth." Then, Emily Hayes, in her slightly too large blazer, her cheap shoes, and her look of absolute exhaustion, walked to the podium. "The DA is right about one thing," she said, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the silence. "The algorithm doesn't feel. And that is exactly its flaw. It doesn't feel, it doesn't know, and it cannot, ever, understand context. It is a machine that is 99.8% certain and 100% wrong," she began. She didn't start with the AI. She started with history. She put the bound volume of the University Chronicle on the evidence projector. "This is my client, Dr. Samuel Harding, on March 12th, 1995, she said, pointing to the man with the coffee. "He is at a peaceful sit-in protest on his university campus. In Vermont, this protest, as the newspaper and a dozen new witnesses I have deposed will confirm, lasted for 36 hours. He was there." She turned to the map, now on the screen. "The bank robbery happened here, in Springfield, Massachusetts, at 4:30 p.m. The sit-in was here, in Burlington, Vermont, 311 miles away. Unless Dr. Harding has the ability to teleport, he has an alibi. A 30-year-old, printed in ink, forgotten in an archive alibi." A murmur swept the courtroom. Sharp was on his feet. "Objection. That photo is just as grainy as the bank photo." "How do we know that's him?" "I'm so glad you asked," Emily said, "because I, too, was wondering. How did your infallible machine get it so wrong?" She called her final witness. Dr. Aris Thorne, a retired 60-year-old professor emeritus from MIT. He was one of the grandfathers of computational AI. He had agreed to testify pro bono after Emily sent him her research, calling the DA's case an act of intellectual barbarism. "Dr. Thorne," Emily said, We are told this AI is 99.8% accurate. That sounds absolute. Is it? Dr. Thorne, a man with a gentle face and eyes that had seen too many simplistic conclusions, shook his head. No, madam, it is not. That 0.2%. That is the margin of error. It sounds tiny. But you must ask, 0.2% of what? He turned to the jury. The database the AI searched contained, let's say, 10 million faces. A 0.2% margin of error does not mean it has a 0.2% chance of being wrong about Dr. Harding. It means it has a 0.2% chance of generating a false positive from the entire database. 0.2% of 10 million is 20,000. 20,000 people who could be, and are, falsely matched by the algorithm. Dr. Harding isn't 99.8% guilty. He is one of 20,000 maybes that the machine spat out. Sharp was ashen. But why him? Emily asked. Why him specifically? Because, Dr. Thorne said, the AI was fed a terrible low-quality image from 1995. It was looking for patterns, not a person. So, it did what it was programmed to do. It found a face in the database with similar orbital geometry. But I ran my own analysis. He gestured to the screen. Another photo appeared. It was also from the sit-in. A different man, standing in the shadows, half turned. His face was structurally similar to Samuel's. The AI didn't just flag Dr. Harding, Dr. Thorne said. It also flagged this man, with a 98.9% match. This man, it turns out, was a known extremist associate who vanished in 1996 and has a criminal record. The algorithm found both of them. The prosecution, in its zeal, simply chose the higher number. They chose the local, stable, easy-to-find history professor over the violent radical who disappeared 30 years ago. The AI did not fail because it was stupid. It failed because the humans using it were. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. The 99.8% was no longer a number. It was a lie. The jury deliberated for 45 minutes. When the foreperson read the words, "Not guilty," Samuel Harding collapsed forward, his shoulders heaving. A lifetime of dignity giving way to a single explosive gasp of release. Emily put her hand on his back, her own tears dripping onto the legal pad she had carried. Unnoticed, all this time. Outside, in the bright, cold sunlight, Maggie was waiting. She had Leo with her. As Samuel emerged from the courthouse doors, a free man, Leo saw him. There was no glass. There was no box. "Papa!" the boy yelled, a word of pure joy. He ran, his small body launching into Samuel's arms. Samuel caught him, lifting him high, burying his face in his grandson's hair, crying openly. "We're going to Arizona, buddy," he whispered, his voice thick. "We're going home." Emily watched them, her own heart so full it ached. Her phone was buzzing in her pocket. A text from a New York number. A missed call from a big Boston firm. The winners were calling. Now that she had won, she silenced the phone. She looked at her mentor, now just a grandfather, holding his entire world. She had saved him. He had saved her. A month later, a postcard arrived at her small office above the bakery. The front was a picture of a swimming pool, glowing an almost electric blue against a desert sunset. The back was a single, scrawled sentence in Dr. Harding's familiar hand. "The primary source was you. Thank you." Tucked inside was a crayon drawing of two stick figures, one large, one small, holding hands under a bright yellow sun.
If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to support the channel so we can create more videos. Thank you, everyone.